Hi, boys and girls. It is Friday, and we are continuing our lesson about Judaism. And so on Tuesday, we had a lot of information because we're covering religion in basically 1.5 days. So thank you for sticking with me and going through it and then doing your reading guide on Wednesday to help solidify those ideas. I know it's a lot to take in, and I really appreciate your help. So we're continuing on with the Jews today. You'll notice it says History of the Holocaust on your screen here. That is because usually in the 6th grade, you get a lesson on the Holocaust, which is about the Jews, and you didn't last year because of coronavirus. So we're going to touch on that today. It's a more modern day look at Judaism than compared to what we did on Tuesday, which was more of the history. Just want to quickly review what you've already written in your comparison chart. So have your chart out, if you would please, so you can make sure you have this information down. Judaism is a monotheistic religion. That means they believe in one God. It is the same God that uh, people of Christians believe in and Islam's believe in. Though it's the same God, they call him different names. So in Judaism, they use the term Yahweh to describe God. And we know that there are about 13 million Jews worldwide who consider themselves a Jew. The religion is over 3,000 years old, probably closer to 3,500 years old. And the most amount of Jews live in Israel right now, and we're going to look at that map in a minute. And moving on, we know that Abraham received a message from Yahweh, God, and God said, "Believe in me, one God, no more polytheism, and take your people to the land of Canaan." And from there, that is where we will, this is your promised land. And so that happens, but then there's a famine. And with the famine, they have to move, and they move west to Egypt. Egypt is going okay, but then they become enslaved by the Egyptians, at which time a person named Moses gets them out of slavery. It's a longer story, we know that, but gets them out of slavery and takes them back over the Sinai Peninsula and back into this promised land that was given to Abraham through God before that. And then after that, we heard in Hip Hughes how many different times this land has changed hands, many different invasions, people taking over, Syrians and Romans and Persians. Although Cyrus the Great with the Persians allows the Jews to continue on to practice, he frees them from their exile, but they're still not their land. And so there's all these different taking over, and the Jews don't have their land. And then we know, just reviewing that, let's see, the Torah is the name of their special sacred documents. It is also called the Old Testament in Christianity. Those are the same. And so we get the information from there. A synagogue, this is broken up into two. It should be one full word. A synagogue is where Jews worship, where they go to practice their faith as the special place. A rabbi is an educated Jew on the laws and the Torah, but he there's no special distinction. Like we maybe you're more familiar with a priest in Christianity. It is not exactly like that. It's more just an education level. He's highly educated. And there are the two different branches in Judaism, Orthodox and Reformed. The basic belief squeezed in one little column. There is one God. And with that God, there's a covenant, a relationship, a special agreement between the people and Yahweh. And they're to live a moral life as outlined in the Ten Commandments and as outlined in the Torah. The Ten Commandments we went through with Hip Hughes, and you can look those up again if you aren't familiar with those. The biggest symbol, the most well-known symbol of Judaism, is the Star of David, which we looked at on the slide the other day. Okay, so thank you for that review. And now I just want to look at your question of the day. Just noticing that in this world, a little bit more expanded out picture, we see the Mediterranean Sea, and we see that Israel is a very small country. That is where the Jews were allowed to go to live. That is their promised land from Abraham, according to the Torah and the Old Testament. And after World War II, they were granted that land back. But you may be wondering how that could be possible, because yes, there were already people there, so that has involved some conflict. And again, I'm recording this in advance, so I'm not sure what's happening right now with the conflict with Gaza Strip and Israel, but there have been conflicts many, many times over the years since 1948 when Israel was a dedicated country and a spot for the Jews. So that's all I wanted to say about that. I just want you to recognize that it's surrounded by many different countries. When they were granted that land, it wasn't empty, and that there's some weird breaks in the political lines. And we also notice that Israel has this really long strip on the Mediterranean Sea, which is great for shipping, of course. So just noticing in general, we talk about, we heard in Hip U say it's the crossroads, right? So noticing that there's lots of traffic that comes through there both in ancient times and current times, and this would be a very popular spot to go through and to travel through for Europeans and then heading into the Middle East. And many of these countries in here are Islamic. And just to take note, in the Middle East, several of those are Islamic. And then in there is also Israel. Okay, so that's the world map. Just give you a sense of where we are. And this is, of course, Africa, and moving on from there. So, today's lesson, we are going to, I asked Mr. Troutner and I asked Mr. Osborne, I said, what did you normally study with your Holocaust lesson? And it is a very cool lesson, and it's very detailed, and they get into a lot of different things. But what they said might be kind of interesting was just to note that in World War II, a man named Hitler wanted to eradicate people who are not of what he called the Aryan race. He wanted people to look a certain way, and he wanted them to be, and he was the leader for Germany, and he wanted Aryans to take over the world. And his technique for that was to exterminate people who were not that. And he had a special dislike for the Jews. And so the Holocaust is a killing of many people. 6 million Jews are recorded killed during the Holocaust under the reign of Hitler, under the reign of the Germans, along with other people who he did not consider of the Aryan race, that may have had a disability, that just didn't fit the criteria of Hitler and his government. And we're not getting into the details of the Holocaust here because we don't have time, and it's a very, very touching subject and has a lot of information to it. But what we want to know is that at the beginning of World War II and before World War II, there was plans to do this eradication of the Jews and people who are not of the Aryan race. And with that, there is this inspirational video that Mr. Troutner and Mr. Osborne shared with me about how there's starting to be some feelings of pressure and some feelings of discontent, and there's starting to be some bad things happening to the Jews, rounding them up, being killed, being forced out of places, being taken to concentration camps. And at the beginning of this whole thing, there's a group, a soccer team, that kind of in their own way stands up to Hitler and says, we are not going to accept this. We are not going to lay down to you or bow down to you. We don't agree with you. And the video will walk you through that, and it will take you through how they were brave, how they stood up to, in their own way, to Hitler and the Germans, and how it gave hope to many people. From there, that was the beginning of things getting bad. From there, things got much worse, and you will probably study World War II and the Holocaust in greater detail in a different time of your life. But we need to know, this is part of why we do social studies, right? We do social studies because we want to know what's happened, and we want to make sure things like that don't happen again, or if they're positive things that they do happen. The Holocaust is something we would not want to repeat. And something that I would always ask myself when I was first learning about the Holocaust is how were 6 million Jews killed without the rest of the world or other people saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? How can this happen? And so that is a question that maybe you'll ponder. That is a question that I don't know all the answers to. I think fear could be a part of that, right? Not sure what to do. And so how does that apply to our lives now in smaller doses? How could that apply to our lives as we look at the world as it's developing and things are happening around the world? And what is our responsibility with things like that? When we think about 6 million Jews being killed because they're Jews and they don't fit the Aryan race look, what does that mean? How does that happen? How can we prevent that kind of thing from happening again? Whether it's religious or just a group of people targeted, what does that look like? How can we be better? So this movie today, this little video is inspirational. It is to give you a little glimpse of the Holocaust, the atrocities that occurred, and then to maybe spark your interest in that, and to end on the idea of people being an inspiration, giving hope, and rallying together in a time that is looking very scary. Okay, teachers, I think instead of playing it in Screencastify, I'm just going to ask you to click on that video in the agenda because it doesn't seem to play well in Screencastify when I was trying to do it earlier. So hopefully you can just go ahead and play that video. And then teachers, if you would like to have a discussion after that, maybe take some comments. I know it's a heavy topic, but we can't be there to facilitate this conversation, although it's an extremely important one and they didn't get it last year. So hopefully there can be a little conversation around the video when it's done. Thank you, and enjoy the video as much as you can as an inspirational piece. And then you have a reflection today, and that will be it for today, except I am going to link in an answer to your work for Wednesday. So at the end, if you can just check your work from Wednesday, I would appreciate it. Okay, boys and girls, have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.